we need to make sure that we bring all of our stakeholder groups together. So we're talking about government, we're talking about our educational partners, we're talking about our community organizations and our workforce boards and the Department of Labor. And really importantly is making sure that businesses are at the center of those conversations, because we need to build the pipeline that meets their needs for today, but also has the flexibility to grow and change with the changing demand of their needs.
A quick interruption to remind you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Made in America podcast. This episode, we're talking about workforce development, such a critical focus in Connecticut and imperative to our business future. I am so excited to have Kelli Vallieres, who's the Executive Director of the Office of Workforce Strategy for the state of Connecticut. Kelli, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me, Ari.
Well, listen, it's my pleasure. It's the Made in America podcast, though, Kelli. So, we start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
For sure. And as a manufacturer, I could have answered that question very easily. But in my new role as Executive Officer of Workforce Strategy, it's a little more complicated. But I would have to say that in my new role, I'm really building a workforce ecosystem for the state of Connecticut.
Wow, that's really an important thing. I sort of alluded to at the outset. Workforce, absolutely critical to economic competitiveness, so important for the whole state. And I know it's really interesting to the listeners of the podcast. So we're definitely going to talk a lot about that. But before we get to that, why do you do it? You had a successful manufacturing business in it for a while, engaged in the community. We were on the EMA board together, but yet you decided to sort of step out of the private sector and take on this new challenge. Why?
Why? Well, I've always really been well invested in workforce development. And as you know, working through EMA and with EWIB and our partners in that region, really feel that workforce development is so vital to not just our companies, but our economy as a whole. And it's the thing that really kind of gets me up every morning and really makes me excited to do that work. And so engaging in this work for the last 10 years as an industry partner, when the opportunity came along to really make a bigger impact on a statewide level, it was really appealing to me to kind of move on and try something new, and left my company in the capable hands of my husband and my children. So they're in good hands, and they're probably kind of happy to have me be doing something else at the same time.
That's right. To get a chance to spread their own wings. So just really briefly, because I think it's important, number one, I think for the community to know that somebody, in your position, in such a critical position for workforce development, even though you have some strong academic credentials, doesn't sort of come out of theory, but comes out of practice. You were the CEO of Sound Manufacturing. So let's just talk a little bit about that background, because I think hopefully that background experience is informing what you're doing today. So let's start with sort of that background. Tell us about Sound Manufacturing and kind of your history there.
Sure. So I started working at Sound right after I finished grad school. My goal then was to be a business consultant. So I didn't get past the first business.
That's right. Your first gig turned permanent.
My first gig turned permanent. But, I've always loved manufacturing. It's something that, my father's did. I've taken over his company. And it's just, there's something really gratifying about making something at the end of the day and seeing what has come out of all of the work that you've done. You really have a way to measure kind of what you're doing. But as I, joined that company, they had quite a few organizational issues, and a lot of them were really around organizational culture and really understanding how the learning process is so vital and important to a company. And so, in the beginning, they would hide mistakes. Well, nobody would want to learn from their mistakes. They want to hide their mistakes, right? So when I would come along and say, hey, so what are you guys talking about over there? Everybody go like, nothing.
Counting the ceiling tiles.
And it'd be like, well, okay, reluctantly, here's this problem. I'm like, well, who was working on this? Who was involved? Well, I don't know. Well, it's like, no, we got to get people involved because we learn from our mistakes, right? And that's such a vital, important part, is saying, we all make mistakes every day, but every time we make a mistake, we learn from it. And the The only bad mistake is the one you keep repeating, right? So we want to make sure that we create an environment in our companies which people can really learn and grow and advance in their careers and help the company move to the next level. And that's the most gratifying part of what I did at Sound Manufacturing was really just building the culture and building a community of learners who are really engaged in what one of our core values is creating a shared understanding, which is probably one of the hardest ones there is, but we always strive for that.
No, absolutely. It's funny. John Pace, who's our chief people officer, he calls it paying tuition when we make a mistake. And I've always really appreciated like framing it up like that. We make a mistake, we got to pay the tuition, we got to learn from that and move on. It's a really important. And just for the people that don't know, I just want to touch on this really quickly. So EMA is the Eastern Advanced Manufacturers Alliance, and it is founded around primarily workforce development, which is such a crucial thing. So we're going to get back to that. But what does Sound Manufacturing do? Where is it located?
Sure. We're located in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, and we're a precision sheet metal contract manufacturer. So we make component parts for all different industries, the medical, automotive. We make a lot of car parts and sound control items. Anything that kind of has a box that needs a technology put into it, we kind of do that, and bracketry and things. Nothing really super exciting, but what we did in response to the last recession is we created our own OEM called Monster Power Equipment. Now that's exciting stuff because we make commercial and municipal landscape equipment. And so our tagline is power designed with bite. And we have a really cool monster logo. So everybody can really get around kind of that part of the exciting part of our business.
So you landscaping equipment?
Yes, mostly commercial vacuum cleaners, like leaf and debris vacuums.
Really?
And we also make the huge municipal ones. So when you see people driving down the road with these big, vacuum machines, it's a good chance we might have made that.
Oh, that's really, really cool. And like, is that just to kind of flip? So in your role there, I know you got involved with EMA, and EMA again, like I said, was around really kind of coalesced around workforce development, which has been a long time issue, right? In manufacturing, long time we've been talking about jobs in search of people, which it's a problem, one we want to solve. And you mentioned EWIB, the Eastern Workforce Investment Board.
Yep.
Board. Yeah. I can never remember if it's board or bureau. And Eastern Connecticut's known nationally for the workforce pipelines. Maybe just talk about that and your experience there.
Sure. I mean, it became really evident in order to really get the talent that we needed within our own company that I needed to start looking outside of our company and getting involved in the talent pipeline process. And I was really fortunate to meet Ray Combs, who is the founder of EMA. And at the time, I think he rebranded it shortly after we got together and really got to meet a community of people that were like-minded around the importance of manufacturing education. And we began, our crusade on developing a process and a pipeline and really career awareness around manufacturing. And we partnered with the Eastern Workforce Investment Board. Our conversations got larger, and we started talking with Three Rivers Community College and Quinebaug Valley Community College. And then we had the, big need of electric boat. And, they've been a really great partner and neighbor in Eastern Connecticut and understood that not only do they need a workforce, but they need to make sure that the community around them and their supply chain was strong as well. So I was very fortunate to be in the ground floor and one of the architects in the development of the Manufacturing Pipeline Initiative, which is now a national best practice model. And that model really is around short-term intensive training programs. So we developed 10-week training programs. I think we're up to 7 or 8 topics now. But when we started, it was just what is the basic needs of intro to manufacturing and what is the 80% of intro skills that every single manufacturing employee needs, no matter what company you're going into. And from there, it really grew and caught on. And now we're trained over 1,600 people over the last 5 years. Really exciting to see that 350 companies have hired out of the pipeline program. And now we're looking at how do we scale that to a statewide level and a national level. I've been having conversations even with other states who have called me to want to learn more about what we're doing there in that pipeline program. So there's a huge opportunity to really gain that best practice across the state and to expand it to other industries as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just really such a powerful thing. And I know that, if you look at the last kind of report out, we just were talking about actually at the EMA board about how, sometimes we've had cohorts that come out where 80% of them have gone to electric boat. The last kind of series that came out, actually only 20% went to electric boat and 80% went to other small businesses. And it's not one, it's, I don't remember if it was a dozen or more small businesses that all picked up people from this pipeline. So it's just such a great, I think, example of a public, private, small business, big business partnership, which for me is the really exciting collaborative part.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's really been the success of the program. I think there's over 30 partners that built the program and keep it running today. And that's really the model that we're looking at the statewide level, right? Is we need to make sure that we bring all of our stakeholder groups together. So we're talking about government, we're talking about our educational partners, we're talking about our community organizations and our workforce boards and the Department of Labor. And really importantly is making sure that businesses are at the center of those conversations, because we need to build the pipeline that meets their needs for today, but also has the flexibility to grow and change with the changing demand of their needs.
Yeah, there's absolutely no question about it. And what's so exciting for me too, and I know we can talk about this more as we go along, but when we think about the impact that it has, and you think about 1,600 people that have come out of the manufacturing pipeline, that's like changed their life for 1,600 people. And if those people are, married, that's another 1,600 people who are impacted by that. And if they each have 2 kids, that's 3,200 children who are going to be impacted by that. So this pipeline is impacting the lives positively of thousands of people, not to mention the businesses that are growing and helping the communities in Connecticut. It's a major impact.
Well, and even more than that is manufacturing is the only industry that for every 1 job that's created in manufacturing, 2 jobs are created in the economy around that job. So it really is expansive. And I think, the latest estimate is it's created over $50 million in tax revenue that comes back to the state to do the things that we need to do to make Connecticut the place that we all want to live.
Listen, growing jobs is just crucial to everything that we do, which I know something that you're passionate about and want to talk about. One thing we'll talk about just briefly while we're still focused kind of on, the manufacturing pipeline. How did we get all the groups working together? I wasn't there at the very beginning. And how did we bring Electric Boat to the table? How did you get UIB involved? Just how did that happen?
It really kind of happened about the coalition of the willing and, the people that really had a stake in what we needed to build there. And there was no, at that time, master plan. It was a community of people and organizations coming together that said, listen, we really need to do something here to address this issue. And I think, that what sparked really the whole development of the pipeline was an application to the Department of Labor for a grant. And it started as a $9 million grant. And the Eastern Workforce Investment Board really, John Beauregard had the vision to see something really big and really understood the importance of those partnerships and that this never could have happened without those partnerships. And it would have never been sustainable without the continued partnership that they've developed. But it's become, such a central component of even the culture of Eastern Connecticut. And the manufacturing community there is very strong. Mm-hmm. And, the pipeline is something that companies have come to really rely on. I know in my company, when we don't hire anybody that doesn't come out of the pipeline unless it's somebody really experienced that comes knocking on our door. We value what we get out of that pipeline program so much that I'm not sure what we would do if it wasn't there and available anymore.
Yeah, that's so important because it's, when you think about being a business being successful and you think about the inputs, whether it's in manufacturing or otherwise, it's not just the raw materials that come in. It's not just the machines or the computers or the office space. Critically, it's the people that put that all together. It's the most valuable resource and it's the hardest one to find, as we all know. So when you have a good source, it's great. What what is it that we can train someone in 10 weeks that can make a difference? When you think about training, you think about, whatever it is, 8 years of elementary school, and then your 4 years of middle school, or 2 years of middle school, or wherever we're at in high school and college. And in just 10 weeks just seems like almost impossible.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And it really kind of expands past just what we can do in 8 weeks. But, we really focused on the fundamental skills. What are the things that everybody needs to do? So it's manufacturing math, it's blueprint reading, it's metrology. And bigger than that, it's those employability skills, the critical thinking, the problem solving, the systems thinking, and getting people to really think more systematic in understanding the whole process. And I think that's what's really neat about manufacturing is it's a process that you can actually see. So you can, in your mind, kind of be able to understand how something was made by walking through that process. So it's a little more concrete. I think it may be a little bit easier than teaching maybe an IT position that's kind of a little more vague in people's minds, not as concrete. So it was really just having those foundational conversations and then understanding from there what specific skill sets are needed. So, to be a welder, there's certain things that you have to know. And those are the things that we teach there. And we bring people in as an entry level. And so the training doesn't stop. The 10 weeks are just the beginning, right? The training doesn't stop there. So from there, it's the organization's job to really take it on and grow that person. So we've had people that, one of the people we hired through the pipeline program went through an apprenticeship program with us on the job training and now is a floor manager. So, that's kind of the bigger picture that we have to look at. And another thing is, people who go into these programs go into it with their eyes open and they have kind of the drive and the ambition to do this. And they go through an assessment process to make sure that this is something that they really want to do. So it gives us that longevity. They put in the hard work. They have the demonstrated ability to learn, I guess, and be committed to something.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's important for the business owners that are listening who are thinking about getting engaged with people that come out of the pipeline. And we had a conversation with Dave Tuttle about this for people coming out of the tech schools, which is also true there too, which is you're not going through a tech school or going through a 8 or 10 week pipeline training program isn't going to make you a 6-year veteran with tons of experience. What we're getting is somebody who's got the drive, the desire, and the basics, but they're going to need a lot of OJT. They're going to need mentoring to get them on there. So you get somebody entry level, you get them prepped up, but then it's on the company, whether it's Sound or anyone else, to kind of help them take that and get it applied and keep that training going. But that's why it's a pipeline. It's a feeder. You're not getting, that you can't cram 6, 10, 15 years of experience into anyone except by giving them 6, 10, 15 years of experience.
Right. Exactly. And it makes that incumbent worker training programs, really important too. So companies really have to do their part, right? So they, people will say, well, why should we, invest in these programs? Shouldn't that be the job of the companies and the organizations? And the organizations, it costs a lot of money to train somebody. I mean, typically you're taking your best person off the line to train your least experienced person. And there's a lot of expense that takes place in there and a lot of investment in that person. And you hope that person's going to stay when they're done with the training programs. So companies are really invested. And I think the manufacturing community as a whole really understands that their human capital, the people that work for them, are more important than any piece of equipment that they have, because that equipment doesn't turn on and it doesn't run and it doesn't work right without that person behind it making it do what it needs to do. So
there's no question about it. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but just to hit on something I'm so passionate about, because the more that we invest in technology, the more we can do either more parts or more complex parts by having technology, the more leverage each person gets. So if I can have one person who can say maybe run 2 or 3 CNC machines as an example in an aerospace shop, so we could do more parts, let's say, that person's that much more important. Because if that person goes down, effectively those 3 machines are down. and the more we leverage technology, the more we have to have higher skilled people and the more valuable those people are. So it's to your point, it's a big investment to get people in there.
It absolutely is. And and the other thing about manufacturing is there's really room for people of varying skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about Industry 4.0 and technology and how important that is, and it definitely is. And people need to upskill, and it provides more opportunities for more advanced careers. But we're always going to need the people that come in and kind of do some of the same things day in and day out, because those things are just as vital. I always said that the person that's deburring our parts, can be kind of one of the most repetitive type jobs, but they can ruin a part in a split second, right? So, oops, we just took off the corner, and they're vital as well. And
Sure.
and we need people. There's places for everybody in manufacturing.
There's no question about that. Sales and marketing, shipping, receiving, sales,
Absolutely.
administration, HR. I mean, it's a full suite and complement of people. So it's absolutely, it's just tremendous. And I think that's what's so exciting, because to me, it's one of those few places in business, even today, where if no matter almost what you want to do, there's a role in there. If you're a hands-on person, if you're a thinker, if you're creative, if you're administrative, if you're in sales, I mean, it's got something for everybody.
Absolutely. And we kind of always think about manufacturing as those technical careers on the job. And we forget that there's a whole suite of professional careers and front office careers that are really necessary in manufacturing. I mean, I laugh because, two of my kind of favorite onboarding stories is I've got a gentleman who finished a year of law school, absolutely hated it. And was a friend of my son's. And my son says, Mom, just give him a job for the summer so he has something to do. So we're like, okay, sure. We put him out on the floor. And my son comes in and goes, this is one of the smartest kids I've ever known in my life. You really should have a conversation with him. Well, he's running our Monster Power equipment company now.
There you go.
So
this podcast has been filled with those people, who were in finance or legal or whatever, and found this industry and just were like enthralled and super passionate. And well, actually, on that, before we go to the workforce strategy, which I keep putting off, but you wanted to be a consultant. Yeah. What happened? How'd you get? Your dad just said, "Hey, give it a shot." Like what caught your eye? What's your conversion story?
I just fell in love with manufacturing. I really did. And I have to say my dad was no longer involved in the day-to-day operations of the business, or it probably wouldn't have happened. But it just, there's something about manufacturing that really just is captivating, and it's almost addictive, and you can see the difference that you make every day, not only in the things that you make physically, but in the people and how they grow. And I think that's really what was always most satisfying for me in that role, and kind of which led me to this new role on a full-time basis.
Yeah, perfect. So great transition. So how did you get approached? And what does your day look like now? When they came to you? Yeah, talk about that.
So I started as being appointed as vice chair of the Governor's Workforce Council. Governor Lamont's Executive Order Number 4 understood how important workforce development was, and he established the Governor's Workforce Council, which is a state workforce board. But he also understood how important workforce was, not just from a federal kind of Workforce Investment Opportunity Act role, but as a statewide strategic role. And the work that was undertaken by the Governor's Workforce Council was really interesting in the fact that we weren't looking at workforce as just a training program, but workforce development really spans K through retirement. And, how we prepare our young students to fully take advantage of their academic careers and be successful really determines how they are able to really engage in workforce when they graduate high school, right? And so we want to make sure that we set them up for success early on. And we want to make sure that we address all of the things that kind of stand up around workforce. So this strategy has 4 pillars. We have work grounded in business leadership. So we've got a bunch of initiatives under business leadership. Our career and academic achievement is got 7 different initiatives under that. And equity and access is, foundational to what we're doing in the Governor's Workforce Council. And we have initiatives around removing barriers to entry. And then last but not least, which all of our manufacturers will love, is data and accountability. And something that, really isn't a strong focus in government as it is in private business. And we can't measure it. We don't really know, is our investment working? Is it not working? What can we do better? There's no continuous improvement if you can't measure what you're doing. So really looking to build out a really comprehensive process. But it was just really intriguing to me as to how we were building this, because I've always thought in systems and ecosystems and understanding, bringing all the stakeholders together. And when they said they were going to stand up an office to support that role, I immediately put my hand up and said, yeah, that's where I would like to be. So I was fortunate enough that after they looked around a bit and realized that I was the right person for the job, I've been fully engaged since. And my days look a lot different, especially around COVID. So I went from—
When did you start?
I started in
day one?
July. I started in July. But prior to, taking on this as a full-time, I really spent the majority of my time on workforce development around the state. I serve on more boards and committees than I can count right now. And I would put, 30, 40,000 miles a year on my car, just driving around. COVID hit and, we stopped driving. Mm-hmm. And then I started working from home. So now my day starts. I put in, up to 12 hours a day. I walk up the stairs to my office, walk back down the stairs at the end of the day, and sometimes don't leave the house for 5 or 6 days in a row. Mm-hmm. But it's been really satisfying, engaging. I've learned a ton in just, how much good work is really being done around the state of Connecticut. It really is a matter of just quarterbacking all of those efforts and understanding that all of these pockets of work, bringing them together. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to start down a road working on something if there's an organization that's already doing a great job. We're trying to bring all of those stakeholder groups together to have a singular conversation instead of 100 conversations.
So listen, let's pull on that for like a little bit, because I think we've all heard, if we've been in business in Connecticut for any period of time, about the fiefdoms, the alphabet soup of organizations. You can pick the description, right? But we hear about it all the time. And so thinking about that, and we've got, I think for a very small state, we have 6 in workforce board? 5. Okay, close enough. Which seems like a lot for a very small state. And any number of workforce initiatives, as you kind of outlined. Mm-hmm. So how do you envision being able to coalesce that and help us to grow in the same direction, so that the efforts become, where the sum become the whole is greater than the sum of the parts? Woo, got it.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So I think it starts strategically with the strategic plan. So we really worked for a year, pulling all of the stakeholder groups together to really identify what do we need to do to build a strong workforce system. Again, thinking K through retirement. And we convened multiple committees around all of those different initiatives and really got the different stakeholder groups together to have those conversations. We put together the plan. We socialize that plan with all of our stakeholder groups, state agencies, the workforce boards, Department of Labor, our educational partners, whether it's a K through 12 system, the state college and university system, our private universities, UConn, to really understand and say, yeah, this is it. We've hit it. These are the things that really push the process forward and move change. And this year, our goal is to activate all of those programs. And so we have 19 individual initiatives in the Governor's Workforce Council. We're pulling together the stakeholder groups from across different the different agencies and organizations, and I have to say we have over 400 people now working on the strategic plan initiatives, which right now is kind of posing another challenge of how do we project manage 19 initiatives that multiple of them have multiple initiatives kind of underneath them that have to roll up. And this is where business really is rolling up their sleeves, because not only did they help inform what all of those initiatives are, but they're really doing a heavy lift to ensure that we can move the agenda forward. For example, Emphasis and Stanley Black & Decker are building out a project management platform for our team to be able to use and manage all of these work streams, and helping us have the use of some of their project managers to kind of get this thing up and off the ground. So just multiple layers of supports and work that we're doing. But it's like, I think every day I learn about a new group somewhere who's been doing work for quite a while. And I'll say, can we add you to the conversation? Can we start to bring these individual conversations into a bigger conversation around our shared initiatives? And some of the work groups are saying, you know what, we're just going to roll right into these committees and work. And others say,
Hold on, just on that point. So meaning less individual initiatives overall?
Meaning less different people working on the same initiatives, right? So like we have a work-based learning initiative where we would like to build a platform that matches companies to students in work-based learning opportunities and build a playbook for companies, right? I know so many companies don't know what to do with a student. Like I would love to have a student, but what do I do with them when they get here? And how do I find a student?
Sure, count us among those.
Yeah. So here's a playbook that says, here's some best practices of things that you can do to engage your students. And, in those conversations, we found the businesses were saying, we have no idea how to talk to the educators or who to talk to say, yes, we'd like to host students. And the educational institutions are saying, we don't know who to talk to at companies. And so we want to build a platform and be able to populate it and make it a matchmaking opportunity. But there's so many other organizations around the state that say, we would like, our group, our stakeholder group, our girls in computer science to have work-based learning opportunities. Or we have, other groups that are looking at, we want manufacturing internships or IT internships. Let's bring all of that work together and build one statewide platform that meets the needs of all of those stakeholder groups, instead of 20 and you're a student going, I'd like to have a work-based learning experience, but I don't know where to go because there's 20 different options.
Wow. So, are we able to make progress? Because it sounds daunting, what you're trying to get your arms around. And it seems like, as we talked about before, a lot of this is going to come down to people management.
Yeah. So that's part of the work that we've been doing, is building the systems and working, to put that process in place. So we have a whole army of volunteers who are working to staff each of the committees and the subcommittees and be responsible for kind of the administration of those working groups. Then we have another tier of, committee leads and making sure that they're overseeing all of the work under their committee and all the different initiatives. And then we have an executive committee that rolls back up to the Governor's Workforce Council. So I think that we've got a pretty good handle on kind of how all these working groups are going to be flowing. And people who, once they get into a working group, they may be in one or two, but they're not going to be spread across a lot of them. So we can take these 400 volunteers and really deploy them in the best way possible. And we have all of our state agencies super engaged. So they're involved in all of those initiatives that really need, whether it's policy or regulations or legislation, around that. And that's how we, put together the governor's workforce bills that are being going through the legislative process right now.
And moving that forward. I mean,
Yeah.
so let's talk about the pillars. And I got the grounded in business leadership. I got the equity and access. I got the data and accountability, but I missed pillar number 2.
Pillar number 2 is our biggest pillar. It's education and career pathways.
There you go. So let's just kind of dig on that for just a second. So grounded in business leadership, kind of maybe expand on that. Like what would, if I'm a business leader in Connecticut listening to the podcast, like what does that mean to me?
Right. Well, we want to build a workforce system that works for our employers and our residents. But in the end, our employers are the ones who are going to be kind of hiring the people out of this system.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to make sure that they're
Ultimately,
really linked
that's right.
in.
For developing a workforce, they got to have work, right?
Exactly. So we want to make sure, just like we did with the pipeline program, that the companies who need to hire people are at the table to say, this is what I need, right? And they're really been very mindful that it's not just the hard technical skills, but it's really the employability skills and those cognitive skills that are so foundational. People tend to call them the soft skills. And I kind of cringe when I hear that because they are foundational, employability skills that we can name and we can develop. Soft skills are showing up on time and shaking somebody's hand and dressing appropriately. But, being a good employee is much more than that, as we know as employers. But it's really rolling up the sleeve. I just want to touch on that
because I'm really happy that you're talking about that, because the thing that's never going to go out of vogue, no matter what the industry is, no matter what you're making, no matter what the technology is critical thinking, is organization, is, plan, do, check, act. Like, right, a lot of these things and approaches are agnostic to what you're doing, but to your point, foundational to being good. And so it's awesome to hear you saying that. How do the companies get at the table? Like, how are we engaging them to be at the table?
Yeah. So we, aside from, the 12 large businesses and medium and small business actually that are on our workforce council, businesses can also engage in any of the number of initiatives. But we have specific initiatives around what we're looking for from the businesses. And the first one is we're building out regional sector partnerships. And we know that we've had strong partnerships across the state, but these are a little bit different in that the partnerships not only will coalesce around one thing, such as workforce, which most of them have, but really around anything that supports that business in those regions. And we know that each region is different. So we would have multiple sector partnerships across the state and roll them up into these initiatives. So what's going to happen is each region has a hub. I call it the hub. The hub is made up of the workforce boards, economic organizations such as chambers of commerce, community organizations, the local school systems, the community college systems, and the universities that are in that region. They become the hub. And then they invite an industry partner to come in and say, what industries in our region really require our concerted effort? And those partnerships are being stood up right now. So across the state, manufacturing is most important. So all of the launches are really around expanding and strengthening the existing manufacturing partnerships that are here in the region, across the state, regionally. And by doing that, we can look at the other initiatives that are in the plan, and we can have our businesses and our regions help implement those on a regional level. For example, work-based learning is a great one, right? What can, as a partnership, can those partners do to develop out these work-based learning opportunities? Another initiative under business leadership is skills-based hiring. This is really important because skills-based hiring kind of levels the playing field for job seekers. So it's so easy for an organization to say, yep, I need somebody with a 2-year or 4-year degree with X number of experiences to fill that position. Well, you might have just cut in half 50% or more of the qualified people who could fill that role, but never had the opportunity to get that earned credential that you're looking for, but have the skills and the knowledge and even the experience, and may even be related in another industry. And very applicable to what you're doing. So we challenge businesses to say, can you look at your hiring practices? And can you really start thinking about what are the skills that are needed, not so much what is the past experience that's needed. And so that's something that, we're charging the business community to look at. And the state of Connecticut has made a commitment, the Department of Administrative Services, to say, we would like to pilot a skills-based hiring program at the state as a way to say we can be a leader in this, and show you how that works. And so we're looking for other companies across the state to do pilot programs with us.
That'd be great. Yeah, I would love to talk about that. Actually, it's a really great idea. Let's talk about the other pillar, education and career development. That seems pretty straightforward. Seems a combination of getting educating and maybe career development being kind of incumbent worker training.
Yeah, so we're really looking at adding career pathway programs to all of our comprehensive high schools.
Oh, sure.
It's really important that kids go through school and they get career awareness early and young.
Absolutely.
Our students and our kids really only see job opportunities for what they see in their communities. They go to a store and they're like, oh, I could work in a store. I could go to the grocery store.
Or what their parents
do. I could be a teacher, or what my teachers do. Thinking about how can we connect curriculum to career awareness for young students, right? Starting in elementary school.
And then just as a quick plug in the past for people that maybe are listening to the podcast regularly, we had Sal Menza, who's the superintendent of Wallingford Public Schools. He talked a lot about career pathways. And then maybe you could just do like a quick 15-second primer for people that don't remember, what is career pathways?
And Sal does an amazing job, and he's a best practice. So ensuring that kids who are in high school can go into technical training from the time that they're in ninth grade through in a career pathway program that has industry recognized credentials and stacking credentials, including dual enrollment and tool credit. Really important so that when kids graduate high school, they're not only college ready, but they're career ready.
And then what kind of careers would those? That's a great primer, by the way. What give me some examples of some careers that would fall into a career pathway?
Sure. So the careers that we're kind of looking at around the state that are in demand now and will continue to grow in demand as we move forward is manufacturing, healthcare, IT, and computer science, super important. We're also looking at green jobs as a newer pathway program coming through, and business and financial services.
Perfect.
And, there's just a huge amount of opportunity in those fields, and we need to get kids really primed to be able to engage in those careers after they get out of high school. 9,000 kids a year graduate without going to college. And what do we do?
We need to find a place for them. Absolutely. And if we want our businesses to grow, we need the people to help them grow. So let's talk about equity and access, and we'll end on data and accountability. But let's go on equity and access for a little bit, because I'm really passionate about the equity and access, because we just have too much of a haves and have-nots in the state of Connecticut. People often think about it along racial lines, which is part of it, but a lot of it is also rural versus suburban. It's really urban and rural, and then suburban really is what I see as the split. But talk a little bit about your view on equity and access and how we're viewing that and what we're going to do about it.
Yeah, and it's really been an evolution for, I think, the work that we've been doing, because when we started the work, we understood that piece, that component, equity and access, was just vital to everything we did. But we looked at it kind of as a systematic issue of what are the barriers. And so we look at childcare, transportation, mental health, and benefits cliffs. That's, the big kind of barriers. But as we started engaging in more conversations with our stakeholder groups and our legislators and our community organizations, we really started to understand that it's a lot more nuanced than that. To your point, there's special populations. It's not just race, but it's, people with disabilities, reentry population, opportunity youth, veterans, and then it's the rural and the urban, and each of those populations and regions has its own challenges. And so it's not a one size fits all. And we need to really understand what we're doing and how that affects the equity of our population. And we can think we know what's best, but we don't. So what we're proposing and what we're working on is developing a workforce equity committee that will twofold oversee all of the work streams that we have through an equity lens. And so as we're developing out policies and processes in all of the 19 initiatives, we want people from the communities that we're serving to be part of that conversation and really pay attention to what it is that they need. And then secondly, we learned that the community organizations themselves really have the opportunity to make the biggest impact. And they're really underfunded. And they're in some ways kind of pushed aside to be like, well, yeah, you do that and we're going to do this. And so our thought is to create an equity fund where we will provide a pot of money, which we're still determining where that's going to come from. I think there's a good opportunity. It could be a combination of public and private and philanthropy funding to say, we need to connect those communities to the workforce system. And those community organizations are most primed to be able to do that.
What's an example of a community organization that you're talking about?
Sure. So just today I had a conversation with United Way. Mm-hmm. And how can they take their 211 system and add to that in the services to connect people into the workforce development boards and the AJC centers. There's a whole group of people who don't go to the AJC centers, and we need to reach them. We've been having conversations with Pastor McCluskey. He oversees 1,600 faith-based organizations in the state of Connecticut. How can we help those organizations help their residents get connected into the workforce system?
Yeah, use those relationships that exist, help people get there. For people who haven't been touched personally by either having somebody with disability in their family or don't live in an urban, didn't come from an urban area, rural area, like why should people who grew up in Glastonbury or whatever, why should they care about equity and access?
We need the full participation of all of our residents to inform who we are and how we think about things. The diversity brings diversity of thought. It brings creativity. It brings, I think, communities together, right? So it's bigger than just getting people to work, but it's providing people with a lifestyle and raising people to have opportunities that they might not have had before. And to have equity and equality and standard of life.
I agree. Listen, you got to have equality and opportunity, which starts with equality and education, which is just so important. And listen, I think we have to look at ourselves. My view, obviously not yours, but we have to look at ourselves as a whole community, and we can only, in my mind, we can only move as fast and be as prosperous as the least among us, and so we have to be looking behind to help people kind of keep up with us, I think.
Yeah, you're spot on there, and it's very important work, and it will enhance the state of Connecticut as a whole with the more people that we can get involved in a productive workforce, because with work comes dignity, mm-hmm. and comes, the ability to take care of your family.
Yes, and I could not agree with you more. People who can take care of themselves, they have a pride, and people want to do it. Mm-hmm. We need to help them, find a way and show them a path. I mean, they have to do the work, right. But I think they will if we can help show them the way and that there is hope. Hope is the most important thing. So let's talk about data and accountability. So important. You've talked about it. I think people in the business community, lots of listeners to this podcast, people you and I both know, are always very cautious about more government initiatives. in more
Right.
government programs. I think many of us are happy that so many things in government now are being led by people like yourself. Colin Cooper is another, the governor is another, David Lehman is another.
Right.
Many people who are in, leadership roles in government came out of the private sector and have that experience. So we're cautiously optimistic about that. And I think we've seen some positive. But talk about data and accountability and what those of us in the business community, what kind of solace we can take and what your view on that is.
Yeah. So, we want to understand the outcomes of what we're doing. So every one of the 17 initiatives in the governor's plan has a measurable outcome to them. And, the task of the subcommittees, their first task is to determine, what are those key performance indicators and what timeline are we putting to get work done? What are the milestones that need to be accomplished in that work? And being able to report that out. I don't think we've ever been able to come up with a strategic plan for the state of Connecticut as a whole and then be able to report out on the progress, right? And some of those initiatives are things that we can stand up fairly quickly, and others are going to take multiple years. And then also looking at, what are the things within our government system that we should have some accountability around. We want to know when we stand up training programs, especially with taxpayer dollars, what is the outcome of those training programs and who's going to work and how long are they staying
there?
in work?
Yes.
Right. So
how much are they getting paid? Right.
Exactly. And, and that also information informs what continuous improvement needs to happen. Right. And I think that one of the things that I'm learning, it kind of in my new role is in bringing the business perspective, is that continuous improvement is always a goal. Right. And the only thing that doesn't change is change.
That's right.
Right.
That's
and the
right.
only constant is change. And that we always have to be striving to do better. And if you don't have measures, you don't know what you're doing and how you're performing and what can be improved upon.
You're speaking to my heart right now. I just wanted to know that. I'm really feeling good about that. And so what I'm hearing is that not only will there be milestones, because things do take time. And I think one of the things governments often don't do well is they only think short term. So we have to do both, just like in business. Yep. Were these milestones, these KPIs be public?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. We're also looking at, being able to collect more data. So we want to know from our educational systems, from the state community colleges, how many people are graduating, what are their demographics, what are the jobs that they're going into. Having a conversation, with the governor's office is they want to know that we're not just developing training programs and putting all of one demographic in that program because they're kind of like, that's what we kind of expect, right? We want to know that women are going into manufacturing, that it's not just men who are becoming welders, but that all ethnicities and backgrounds are getting into these high-paying jobs. And that's part of the equity piece, right? Is making sure that we are reaching those communities.
To accomplish all these goals you talked about, from being grounded in, business education, career development, equity, and access, all comes down to, KPI tracking and making sure that we're inspecting what we expect and we're measuring it. The only way we know if we're getting it is if we're counting it. And the only way we know if we're getting better is by counting, so we know if we've improved. Exactly. and kind of going through that lean continuous improvement process, which you know so well. So this is really super exciting. I look forward to having you back where we can sort of talk more about the results. So I'm going to hold you to those KPIs. So we'll start talking about that. Before we kind of get to rapid fire round of questions, I just wanted to ask you, when you sit down in your leadership role and you think, and you maybe think about 3 years out or 5 years out or about that future, what does it look like? What is the success of all the work you're doing look like? What can we be excited about of the vision 5 years hence?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really about creating that ecosystem that works for everyone, that it works for our businesses. The businesses are getting what they need, but it works for our students, and that our students are not only getting a good academic education, but they're getting really prepared for the world of work in areas that are exciting to them, right? We say we never work a day if we do something that we love, right? And we want kids and all of our citizens to have that opportunity. And we want to make sure that everybody who wants to work is working to the highest level in which they can achieve, and that they feel good about what they're doing. And, it sounds idealistic, and I tend to be that way, but and to that end, if our workforce system is working for everyone, we really have a vibrant economy as a whole. Right?
Absolutely. Vibrant economy. And I mean, something that you had said to me kind of in our prep call was everything great we have in Connecticut, we have because it was built on great businesses, great economy, which was all built on the people that came here, the people that moved here to work here, the great quality of life, the roads that we have, the schools that we have, the houses that we have. Somebody built that. Somebody put all that together. If we want that to continue for ourselves and, for our kids, we need to continue that train and make it better tomorrow than it is today.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. Well, listen, keep the idealism, Kelli. I think in order to achieve something big, we have to dream big, and there's going to be naysayers and people that want us to dream smaller and think smaller. But, it's by thinking big and taking those steps. You got great pillars to build on. I'm excited to watch you be successful.
Thank you very much.
Well, listen, rapid fire round of questions. You ready?
Okay.
All right, here we go. Red Sox or Yankees?
Red Sox.
Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Starbucks.
Staycation or exotic destination?
Well, our staycation is our house in Myrtle Beach.
Okay.
So I don't know how you want to say that.
We'll go staycation. iPhone or Android?
Android.
Sports car or SUV?
SUV.
Do you have a favorite business book?
A favorite business book? Traction.
Traction's a good one. If you could do anything in the world other than your current role or your previous role at Sound, you don't get to choose that, and you had to do something else, what would you do?
That's interesting. So my husband and I have talked for years about building some type of a community center for kids to come to after school and who can kind of get maybe some of the things that they don't get at home and have a place where they can grow as people, get some extra academic help that they need, and just learn really life skills and have some fun doing it.
Wow, that's really cool. That could still happen,
Good.
What's something that you learned, Kelli, early in your life or early in your career that's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
There's no such thing as failure. We learn from our mistakes. I repeat that mantra all the time, and never give up.
Never give up. What's one thing you learned later in career or later in your life that if you could go back and tell young Kelli, and if she would listen to you, it'd make a really positive impact on her life?
Oh, that's an interesting one. If I could go back, you didn't prep me on that question.
No.
I think that I think one of my weaknesses, and I've learned more and more about this, is kind of being a little bit more steadfast in my leadership skills. Sometimes I can be a little bit of a pushover. And I think being a little bit stronger in some of my convictions earlier on, I might have moved things forward a little bit faster.
Ooh, I feel that one so much. Kelli, thank you so very much for coming on and sharing what you're up to. It is so important what you're doing. I'm rooting for your success. I know it's going to happen.
Thank you very much.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct.
As always, thank you so much for tuning in and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a community where we can learn and grow together. Your input, feedback, and engagement is critical to making that happen. Please do comment, like, and subscribe so more and more people can hear what we're doing and join our community of growth and success. Thanks so much for tuning in. Talk to you again soon.